Morning YouTube. I just thought I'd show you this building over here. I don't know if you can see it, the low-lying building here. Yeah, that's what they call an SMU. SMU. It used to be a bint farm until relatively recently. But then these government grants became available to establish SMUs, and the guy who owned that, I don't think he was doing very well as a bint farmer anyway. He's converted it into an SMU, and he's doing all right now, I think. Because you know, as I say, there's lots of governmental grants have been put into that area, and this area where I live is one of the kind of priority areas for establishing them. I mean, I'm sure you know what SMUs are, but that's if you're not sure, if you live outside the UK, SMU stands for Satisfied Monkey Unit, which sounds funny, but it's not the right name. You know, there's no monkeys in there. You know, nothing to do with monkeys at all, actually. I mean, it should be called a Satisfied Bonobo Unit, really, and because there's bonobos in there. And bonobos aren't monkeys, they're apes, quite closely related to chimpanzees, I think. So as I say, it should be called a Satisfied Bonobo Unit, but I don't know, somebody called it the SMU to start with, and the name kind of stuck, so everybody calls them SMUs now. But it's a fascinating place, actually. I think there's about 25 or 30 bonobos in this particular unit, and there's 2 or 3 scattered around this small town where I live, and they have a fantastic life. I've got to tell you, if reincarnation was a fact, which clearly it isn't, and I had the choice of what to come back, I would come back as a bonobo in the Satisfied Bonobo Unit over there, because they have it fantastic. I mean, they've got endless amounts of toys to play with. Bonobos are big sex fiends, as you possibly know, so they have endless access to sex. I mean, I'll say more about that in a bit, actually, but lots of all the best food, you know, they have a great life. Actually, they've changed them relatively recently, about 18 months ago or a year ago. They started changing these, because it used to be the case that these Satisfied Monkey Units prioritised the happiness of the bonobos and made them all happy, you know, just give them everything they wanted. But actually, it didn't work out terribly well, as it turned out. You know, the bonobos, well, I don't know, they died quite young. They got bored or something. I don't know what it was. It was like that scene in The Matrix, you know, where Agent Smith talks to Morpheus about the first version of The Matrix. It was a bit like that, I think, something like that. So the happy bonobos didn't really get on at all well. So they started giving them problems instead, and tasks and challenges. So, for example, they'd put the food a little bit out of reach. You know what I mean? Not completely out of reach, but the bonobos had to really work to get there. And there was lots of studies done into it about exactly what kind of challenges you have to present. So there were always challenges that could be accomplished, but that were right at the extent of the bonobos' capacities. And when they did that, that's when they found that that's when you optimised the satisfaction of the bonobos. So things like, as I say, putting the food out of arm's reach or just within arm's grasp. Got a lot of climbing and scrambling around to get there. Solving cognitive puzzles, you know, to pull levers and to open boxes and these sort of things in the right order. So I was going to jump across this mud. But again, just about solvable. And the bonobos thrived under those conditions. You know, their health was better. Their they seemed to be better. So they really got good at that. So as I say, there's about 25 or 30 very, very satisfied bonobos indeed in that unit back there. Which is nice, you know, it's great actually. If you haven't got an SMU, should be SBU, if you haven't got an SMU near yourself, or if you have, I should say, I would go and visit it and have a look around, see what you think. I mean, these things, you know, I'm sure you know the history of it, but just in case you're not familiar with that, these things were established, I don't know, 3 years ago, something like that. It came out of all that those scientific studies that were going on at that time, or just preceded that. Actually, there's an article in last month's Scientific American which referred to it, so you might want to take a look at that. But it was all that studies 4 or 5 years ago to do with sentience and satisfaction levels, and whether it was possible to measure these things. And of course, you know, as you know, they discovered that there are some measures that can be made. I don't know the details, it's not really my thing, is it? But apparently you can measure... Fucking hell, I'm tired. You know, you can measure the sentience of organisms. Humans, of course. In fact, I think the early ones were done on humans, because then we could report back, so we were the best subjects. You know, you do brain scans and this, that and the other. And then if we were able to transfer that research to other animals, and particularly, as I say, bonobos, because they're one of our closest relatives, but even things like dogs, you know. And all these things show sentience. So what they found, as I'm sure you know, is that sentience isn't like a single thing, obviously everybody knows that, but it's a range of different properties, like dimensions. You can measure sentience along these range of different dimensions, and two of the most important ones they found at the time, they thought it was one but it turned out to be two, was initially what they thought to be happiness, and that's a measure of sentience. But since then, as I say, they've broken it into two, happiness and satisfaction levels. Anyway, they did that, and they can measure the amount of sentient satisfaction in a population and an individual initially, and then by aggregating that, and it isn't just a question of adding it up, you have to do quite complicated algorithms apparently to measure the sentient satisfaction of a population, but apparently they can do that, and that's a population not just of humans obviously, but of sentience in the most general sense. So my dog's sentience would be included in that measure. If we're measuring the amount of sentience in this little field I'm in right now, my dog would be in there, I would be in there, and various other animals, the rabbits would be in there, insects less so. These things are all on sliding scales. So you can measure the amount of sentience in a population, and particularly in those dimensions, the happiness and satisfaction levels. So they start to be able to measure the satisfaction levels in populations of sentient animals, which is great. That was a really useful metric. But what they found was that certainly in the UK where I live, some populations have got higher levels of sentient satisfaction than others, as you might expect. It doesn't just vary from individual to individual or from one moment to the next. It also varies from one population to the next. So some populations, this population for example, which has got some problems as a population, unemployment levels and one thing or another. This population, this little community where I live, had quite a low sentient satisfaction level, below what they regard as a kind of cut-off point, as a kind of benchmark. Below this certain benchmark they set, the idea is you're kind of in negative equity in terms of your sentient satisfaction. And they discovered that some communities, like this one, are in negative equity. So they made these government grants available initially to fund research into how that might be changed, and then latterly into funding these SMUs, satisfied bonobo units, because what they discovered was that you can increase the total amount of sentient satisfaction in the population artificially by creating these units which have very high levels of sentient satisfaction. The amount of sentient satisfaction that bonobo unit I pointed to, the satisfied monkey unit, is incredibly high. If you were to isolate that particular building and measure the amount of sentient satisfaction in there, it'd be through the roof. It'd be just incredibly high. So when you aggregate that with the community as a whole, it just raises the level, you know what I mean? To get these communities, including this community, just above that low point, above the benchmark, this 0 point. So up until about 3 weeks ago, this community was just above the 0 level. Which is fine. That's all. It's all in positive. So it was considered a satisfied community. I say about 3 weeks ago because of because of some developments in the town centre. There's a bypass which takes traffic around the town centre. Since that's been in operation, a lot of traffic obviously doesn't go to the town centre anymore, which means that some of the shops are not doing as well as they did. And one woman, she has a shop in town that sells like hats and shoes and that kind of stuff. And she's been struggling for a while anyway. She went bust, there's just no way she could keep going. So obviously her satisfaction levels dropped quite a bit. And then there was this old lady in this old folks home who was actually on death's door. She was dying quite peacefully. And then there was a medical intervention which brought her back right from the brink, really right from the brink. She was just, kind of saying goodbye to her family and saying she was in God's hands now. But then the medical interventionist got in there, brought her back, and as I say, this is about 3 weeks ago. And now she's in quite a lot of pain. She's fallen over twice, big scabs on her head, So unfortunately, those two things, this woman going bankrupt, and then this old lady's life not ending pleasantly when it should, has dropped the overall sentient satisfaction levels below the 0 again. So we are again in negative equity here. So what they're doing over in the SMU, the Satisfied Bonobo Unit, should be SBU, what they're doing over there is they're getting a lot of the animals to breed. I think I mentioned earlier they got completely free access to sex with one another. That's part of their satisfaction quotient. But Normally they're injected with, what do they call them? Contraceptives. There's some kind of contraception thing they can inject into these things. So they're not doing that for a few weeks. So get a few more pregnant, raise the number in the farm over there from in the unit over there from 25 or 30, which it is now, to about 45 or 50, and all that increased satisfaction in that sentience over there will raise the level of the whole community up back past the 0 point again. You know, which is great. You know, I'm quite looking forward to that. Because I think, you know, obviously we'll all be in a better place, I think, once there's more bonobos happily swinging through the trees and solving those puzzles over there. That'd be great. Anyhow, yeah, so if there is an SMU near you, go and have a look. You know, because they are fascinating. I mean, you might get depressed as a result, just momentarily, because they're having such a great life that nothing you do can possibly match up to it, unfortunately. But if you get too depressed, you know, don't worry, they'll just breed some more bonobos and that'll balance you out. Anyway, yeah, that's that.